Hey, everybody, welcome to the Asian Americans. It is in early part of April. We're going through some extremely challenging and new times here around the world. And I still want to focus on telling really great, inspirational, and badass Asian American stories. So, our guest today, um, you may have tried his product. You may have seen his product at your local stores, Asian markets in particular, and have always wondered, how does an authentic Vietnamese fish sauce make its way to Americans' grocery shelves? So before we get started, I want to thank Ty of Asians Never Die for making this introduction and bringing Danny into my world and into our show. And so, Danny, welcome to the show.
Hey guys, thanks for having me, Jerry. And yeah, I would love to share my story with your listeners.
Yeah, so if you're watching this video, you know that he is the quintessential marketer because he's wearing his company's a polo shirt, and you know it's custom because it's got the polo logo on it too. So, let's start, and we'll talk about the fish sauce business and how you ended up bringing that over here stateside. But let's start with you and your family's immigrant or Asian American origin story. How did you guys end up in the States under what circumstances, and where did you guys first move to?
Got it. So I grew up in Saigon, Vietnam, and my grandfather was part of the Vietnamese government, the Southern Vietnamese government. And then he also worked with the American government. So after re-education camp, I think he got locked up for around 17, 18 years, which is a lot. Yeah, normally re-education camp's only a couple years, but he was pretty high up there. So, they made sure to teach him how to farm real well. Um, yeah, so after 17, 18 years, there was a group of Vietnamese people, including the American government, and they set up a special visa. I think it was HO. That's what they called it, HO visa. And so what it is that it allows, Southern Vietnamese families that work with the government to be able to come over here. Now, my story is kind of special because usually you can bring your kids, but then if your kids have kids already, it's they don't allow it. Yeah, so some way, somehow, God bless us, and we were able to all go together. So 3 generations went: my grandparents, my parents, and me, my younger brother. So we landed in, my uncle sponsored us, and we landed in Costa Mesa, California in 91. Yeah, 91, when I was 8. So I grew up in Costa Mesa. Funny thing is, got caught up, normal gang stuff, Asian kids in the 90s didn't know I didn't know if I was Asian, or I didn't know if I was Vietnamese, or I didn't know if I was American. We were I think my generation, we were kind of stuck in between. We call us, a lot of people call us 1.0, right? I'm sorry, 1.5 or something like that.
Yeah, I moved here to nearby Fullerton in '92 when I was also 8. So, it's at that time there wasn't a lot of, sure, there were older Asian Americans,
Mm,
in our respective communities, but I think something you're alluding to is there just wasn't a lot, an ample amount of role models to look up to say like, hey, we can do that. So the things and the people that we were being influenced by, I think maybe a little bit different than what we're trying to do here in this show. So take me back to Costa Mesa as you're growing up, through your high school years. What at what point, I guess, did you decide to, then the next chapter of your life was starting, a restaurant in Vietnam. Not to skip over an entire decade of your life, but talk to me about your growing up and then how you viewed identity and the way that it formed what you wanted to do with your life.
mm. Yeah, so basically, real quick, so grew up in Costa Mesa, went to elementary school and junior high. And back then, Costa Mesa, junior high and high school was all clumped in together. Yeah, it was 7 to 12. So I got in
Wow.
trouble real quick, right? Hang out with the older boys. And so my parents caught wind of it, and they're like, we're moving you. So instead of finishing high school in Costa Mesa, they moved me to Brea, and I did my whole 4 years of high school there. I think at Brea High School that time, I could count the Asians with, my two hands. So being from Vietnam to America was a culture shock. And then going from, pretty much an Asian high school, or at least half and half,
Yeah.
to a predominantly, all white school, it was another culture shock. But I really truly believe, that move really saved me from potentially, being in prison or just doing stupid stuff and like getting locked up. And so after high school, I did what all good Asian kids do. You go to college. I think the three big things your Asian parents want you to be is what? Doctor, lawyer, engineer, right?
One of the three. Yeah.
So I went to Cal Poly Pomona for engineering. It didn't quite work out. And so after the first quarter, I transferred to Cal State Fullerton for business.
Mm.
In college, I worked in streetwear. That was really popular at the time. All my friends were in it, Nike Dunks, Supreme, and all that stuff. And then after that, I got into banking. So I became a business banker. And I think I was around 27. And a couple of my friends had moved back to Saigon.
Huh.
Saigon during the early 2000s was kind of like the golden age of Vietnam, where it's really, how should I say this? It went through an industrial revolution of all sorts. And so it was growing leap and bounds. And a lot of Vietnamese were just moving back there. And also expats, collectively, we call it the Wild Wild East, kind of like when people came to California for the gold rush. So 27 years old, I moved back there. A friend of mine was like, hey, why don't you give it a try? What do you got to lose, OC, living in Orange County, we're kind of in the suburbs, so things are a little bit slower. And people have the tendency to say, nothing ever changes in OC, kind of like we're in a bubble.
Yeah.
So I guess that was a fork in my life where I was like, hey, I wasn't really happy with my life here. Not that there wasn't anything not to be happy about. In hindsight, moving to Asia and Vietnam really opened my eyes to see how blessed we are in Orange County or just America as a whole. And so 27, I moved back to Vietnam. I told my parents I'd be there for around 3 months. It ended up being 3 years. So that move to Vietnam really changed and shifted my life from, being a model minority, doing corporate jobs and stuff to thinking twice, hey, is there something out there more for me?
Tell me about Danny going back to Vietnam, because right now I think even I don't know 15 years later or 10 years later, we see more Asian Americans, friends of ours, going back to Asia for business or entrepreneurial opportunities. Something that comes up a lot is once you're Vietnamese American or once you're Korean American, you are also treated slightly differently when you come back home because you're not a local anymore.
Yeah.
Did you get any of that? How was that in your reacclimation back home, per se, at 27?
No, yeah, definitely. You can see that in a major city, but even more so on the countryside. You're almost borderline celebrity status just because you're considered a I don't know how to call it. Like we call it Viet Kieu, which means like Vietnamese abroad, right? And so so that does play into why a lot of expats or Asian Americans move back to Asia. But even more so, I think that we finally, for a lot of us that are kind of like halfers, kind of half American, half Asian, we kind of see that us as a puzzle piece, we fit better into that puzzle because now understanding best of both worlds and having both culture, we can actually, in terms of business or just corporate positions, we're able to kind of be the bridge between Asian culture and American culture when doing business. And so a lot of I feel like not just Vietnam, but a lot of the Asian countries, they see that as an advantage. Whereas it was weird when I was growing up, I was like, man, I'm kind of half. I'm not sure if I'm Vietnamese or American, and that seemed to be a disadvantage. But moving back to Asia, things that were a disadvantage to us became an advantage. So I can see there's an allure to that, and it's a positive. It's definitely a positive thing.
Yeah.
Yeah. You
So how
find
did your
yourself, go ahead.
how did your 3 months turn into 3 years?
Sorry. So so I was there for 3 months, and I met a girl there who is now my wife. And yeah, so I met her, and then things just happened. You know, I met her, and then I came back to the States, and then I told my parents. Initially, I went to Vietnam to visit family and friends, and then I told my parents I'm going to be back. I'm going to go back for another 3 months. They're like, okay. So that 3 months ended up being 3 years because I met somebody, and it just kind of happened. You know, the crazy thing is, at least in my group of friends, um, people would think I'd be the last person to move back to Vietnam or Asia. People would think I'd be the last person to, you know, be in a long-term relationship and get married. I think it's always that way, right? The last one in the group
Yeah.
always ends up being the first one doing it.
Yeah.
Um, yeah, so actually meeting her is how I got into the food industry and doing restaurants and the fish sauce. Yeah.
What was the first thing that what you tried or attempted to start in Vietnam within the food space?
So to backpedal a little bit, I did try to find corporate jobs in Vietnam
Mm.
because I was doing, you know, banking, business banking, but they were offering, you know, like 750 a month to live in a major city. You know, I couldn't afford that to live on 750 a month. You know, maybe if I was in the countryside, then I could.
Yeah.
So, so actually, it happened by chance because I was craving for boiling crab. You know, boiling
Yeah.
crab.
Yeah. Yeah.
Vietnamese-Cajun
Yeah.
crawfish. So I was craving for it like crazy. I don't, and so my friends came back to visit all the time. Being in Vietnam, everybody that comes back, they'll hit you up because they want you to take them around, you know, and you don't mind seeing familiar faces. So I asked them to bring me back some spices. I made it, and I was like, "Hey, this is pretty good." And then a little light bulb went on inside my head, and I was like, hey, you know, there's no Cajun or crawfish in Vietnam at that time at all. This was about 8 years ago, 8, 9 years ago, 2011, 2012, maybe about 10 years ago. So I was like, yeah, I know Vietnamese people in America, they really like this stuff. um, and Asians too, obviously. And then I was like, I think people in Vietnam would like it too, they just don't know it
Yeah.
yet. So yeah, that's how it got started. I opened up with a friend. He's also an expat. He grew up in Orange County, went to UCI, and we opened our first restaurant. I think 2011, 2012, somewhere around there. So we were the first to introduce like Vietnamese-Cajun to Vietnam, and then we brought crawfish over. And long story short, we got like 4 locations now in Saigon.
Oh.
Uh, it was a very tough learning experience, you know, being in the kitchen. I thought it would be easy. Hell, I'm just steaming seafood, making some sauce, throw it in a bag, shake it up, and serve it, right? Little did I know what I was getting myself into. I mean, me and my wife, we were doing like 10, 12, 14-hour days. And then after that, we would have friends visiting. So we take them out, you know, partying and stuff. But in hindsight, you know, those were some of the best years of our time of our life. We were young, and, you know, we had full of energy. I don't know. I don't know if I could do it now, but yeah.
What were some of the
I'm
lesson what were some of the lessons that um what was the most useful thing that you could in helping some business problems, having the duality of understanding of how businesses operated here through your experience at the bank and just growing up here, and then trying to bring a brand new concept to an Asian country?
Yeah, you know, in Asia, doing business in Asia, it really helps if you're able to understand Asian culture and American culture and realize that everything you bring from America it might be better, but it won't necessarily work out just due to culture differences. And then also, sometimes you just have to give up the idea of, hey, you know, in America, it works really great. I'm going to change the world in my country, you know.
Yeah.
I think a lot of Asian entrepreneurs have that thinking, hey, I'm going to bring something great from America. I'm going to take it to Asia, and it's going to blow up. And sometimes, you know, I would say maybe 1 out of 9 times it might work out, but majority of the time, from what I see and experience with other friends doing business in Asia, it doesn't. You really have to come to Asia with a more humble approach. A lot of times I notice a lot of Asian entrepreneurs thinking, there are big sharks, coming back to Asia, because you do get some limelight, oh, you're American, they do gravitate towards you, or, speak highly of you. But once it gets down to doing business, it's also business as usual, right? There's that, my wife has the same, business is business and Christmas is Christmas. So, a lot of times with Asian culture, they might seem a little bit, it might seem like they're going your way, right? The way they'll respond to you, they'll nod, they'll say yes or whatnot. But by the time, it comes down to business, it's going a whole different way.
Yeah.
So I think that throws a lot of people off. And a lot of times it discourages them. They're like, hey, man, I thought I was bringing something really great back to my country. Why isn't it working out? It might not be the idea, but I think a lot of times it's the culture difference
Sure.
that need to be sensitive about. And if you are sensitive about that, I think it'll work out a lot better.
How was your brand and your new to Vietnam food item received by the local population? And you said you went from 1 to 4 stores. What was that like? Oh my God, you were the hottest spot in town, or did you have to teach people what it was?
You know what it was? So our motto was this: seafood in Asia is very expensive because majority of the seafood gets exported to places like America.
Yeah.
Most people don't realize this, but 90% of the seafood that American consume is actually imported in from other countries. And so in Asia, seafood at restaurants for local people would always be marked up at least three to five times. And so I was like, hey, I want normal people to be able to have seafood too, the middle class or just anybody, it doesn't matter. And so our model was more fast casual, and then we would mark it up just like we get it for $1, we'll sell it for $2, right? Instead of getting it for $1, sell it for 3 or 4 or 5. So that was our motto. And so the funny thing is that, with Cajun and crawfish, it gets real dirty. So the best setup has always been to put butcher paper on the table,
Yep.
the seafood into a bag, and serve it, right?
Yep.
So customer was like, even though we were selling it at a cheaper rate, seafood was still expensive to begin with. To put it in perspective, like crab would be around like $30 a kilo, and that's normal going rate,
Yeah.
And so they're like, why the heck am I buying, expensive food and you're throwing it in a trash bag? They straight up call it a trash bag. And we try to explain to them, we're like, no, this is not a trash bag. We're actually using, food plastic bags. So that was a barrier to get over. The second one was that we had a friend who was in the oyster industry, and he was working with a local French guy who moved back to Vietnam, and he was farming fin de claire oysters. So, in America, we're used to the smaller oyster being of higher quality, right?
Yeah.
And the bigger one are usually the lower price points. So I kid you not, I was getting these oysters flown in from Nha Trang, which is middle part of Vietnam, from Nha Trang to Saigon, flown in daily. And I was serving at my restaurants, and, our whole model stayed the same. So when they compare the oysters, there's like, hey, why is these oysters so small? Are you ripping us off? Is it cheap? What's the deal? So those were some of the things that we had to overcome with that, and also we had to they weren't used to wearing bibs.
Yeah.
Like I said, I brought the whole American thing that Boiling Crab was doing, and I thought it was great, because that's the best way to eat seafood.
Yeah.
But it took a while for them to catch on or be okay with it.
Yeah.
I think now it's actually a lot easier to implement more American business models in Asia, because I think now Asians across the board, we're traveling so much.
Yeah.
That the middle class, the middle class and the upper class, they're familiar with these types of foods and,
Sure.
and stuff.
And like, we have the internet, so people watch YouTube and people watch, other things, and at
Yeah.
least they feel like they've seen it before. Maybe they haven't eaten it or, whatnot. Um, and so going from a very successful multi-location chain of Cajun seafood restaurants, how
Uh,
did the pivot to slinging fish sauce back home in America? How did that transition
so
happen?
I just want to give a shout out to my old restaurant because my friend's doing great. It's called the Cajun Ghoul. So ghoul means crab in Vietnamese. So I did like a two word name.
Mm,
Giving him all credit. He's the one that him and his wife was the one that expanded it and took it to the next level. Um, so yeah, I was running the restaurant about almost a year in, and me and my wife, we were just hanging out laying in bed at night, and I was reading GQ magazine, and they asked all the top chefs in America, what's your secret ingredient? So they all said fish sauce. You got Italian chefs, American chefs, French chefs. David Chang was also in the mix.
yeah.
He was the food was blowing up back then, so I was following them. So yeah, they all said fish sauce. So I turned to my wife. I was like, "Hey, doesn't your family make fish sauce?" And then she kind of nonchalantly just said, like, "Yeah, so," you know, and so another crazy light bulb went on inside my head
Mm,
because when I look more into it, I tend to have a tendency to kind of like get lost in a certain subject, kind of like when you watch YouTube and you just go deeper and deeper, right? And you don't know where the hell you ended, how the hell you ended up there. But yeah, so I started looking into fish sauce and stuff like that, and I realized 99% of the fish sauce in the market is all commercial chemical product.
huh.
It's actually not even real fish sauce. They buy dead fish, they powderize it, they mix it with chemical, and that's why fish sauce has a stinky reputation
Oh,
because the ingredients are essentially, dead decaying products,
yeah.
right? And so I learned about that, and then the more I asked about my wife's family, their history, their heritage, I was like, wow, that's crazy. Like they've been doing it for 70 years. Her great grandfather started it, so we're fourth generation. And just his story is crazy. He was an orphan just working from town to town, landed on the island, which is where we produce the fish sauce now. He ended up, like kind of like a Cinderella story. He worked for the richest family on the island, married the daughter, and then he became the richest man on the island, bought up all the land. They call him Lord of the Island. He didn't know how to read and write, but he can calculate faster than a calculator. Like just these crazy tall tale stories that you would hear of your Asian ancestors. And I was like, wow, that is a crazy story. And then I had the feeling, I was like, Vietnamese people, we've been here for 30, 40 years. Um, I would like us to have a product for us, by us. I grew up during the FUBU generation. So I really clinged on to that. And I was like, I want people to know more about Vietnamese culture besides, pho and ao dai, right? That's predominantly what we're known for. But fish sauce is actually in our blood. We use it to cook with everything. And, across Asia, everybody uses fish sauce. Koreans use it to make kimchi and tofu soup. Japanese have their own fish sauce. Chinese has an area where they predominantly only make fish sauce, which is crazy, right? And so all the way down to Southeast Asia. And, Andrea Nguyen, which is a James Beard a winner author, she mentioned something to me. She's like, yeah, even though a lot of people think fish sauce started in Italy or the Greek and the Romans back then, it was in Asia because back in the day you had to salt fish to preserve it,
Right.
and people don't throw anything away back then, like us now. So the liquid, they realized they can use that as a salt substitute, and it packs a great umami, and it came out great for cooking. So they can reuse the salt and the fish oil to cook food, and that was great, and preserve the fish at the same time. So yeah, sorry, I think I went off on a tangent,
No,
but
it's
yeah,
good.
that's pretty much how it started. And so me and my wife, during that time, we were like, we decided to sell our portion of the restaurant to my friend because he was staying there indefinitely. we learned right on, you can't run a restaurant if you're not there. And we did not have any experience to run it and scale it on that level. I think him and his wife was able to do it great because he came from IT background, so he did a lot of like, like it was very precise scheduled, and so it's very easy to scale up. And she brought a lot of great other menus to the food to make it more popular, because at first not everybody would like Cajun butter garlic. It seems real heavy at first, right? And so yeah, we moved back to the States and we launched this with zero experience about 5 years ago. Didn't know how to import, export, didn't know how to, didn't know any distributors, like we did everything. Um, I mean, we're even the sample ladies, right? We do samples at the supermarket. We wanted to learn everything, we were very blessed that because her family has been manufacturing fish sauce for 70 years. So we did have a great product to start out with. I think that's the most important thing. And, I'm very proud that we didn't get any handouts from them. We purchased the product, we built a brand, we did everything on our own. One thing I really like about her family business culture is that every family member have their own brand.
Hmm.
So, like no one is less resting on the laurels, as they say. Yeah, so everybody have their own brand, and our idea was to introduce artisanal traditional fish sauce to the rest of the world, not just the U.S. We wanted a special product that our people could be proud of, but then we also wanted to introduce it to, other Asian cultures and Westerners. Because what's it called? So we named the brand Sun. Is named after the family island, Sunrai Island, and it also means father to son, because her dad kind of gave me his blessing and passed on the baton to us. We're the fourth generation owners still doing fish sauce business, and we're the only ones doing it. So all the other, I don't know, like kids or nieces and nephews or whatever, we're the only one crazy enough to do this. I mean, in the beginning, the family's like, "Are you sure you want to do this?" Like, so some even try to talk us out of it. But I really believe that, my wife's family had a great product and a great story, a lot of history, heritage, and culture. And, I just wanted to share that with the rest of the world. And I hope, people can be proud of it. Yeah.
5 years ago, you brought your first case or bottle of sunfish sauce, and nobody in America knew who you were. Now you can
Yeah.
find it in shelves, in multiple states, in multiple restaurants, even in their kitchens. Um, share with us some early tough lessons of the hustle and the grind that it took for people to take your product and for people to get to know you.
Yeah, it was another culture shock for me because, being usually let's just talk about the Asian restaurants or the Asian supermarket. Most of the Asian supermarket, they all have great stories. They all started out in their truck. They went to Chinatown, LA. They bought products and they sold it back in their communities. Just like Sriracha story, he made it in his garage and he sold it in his truck. Just like Three Crabs fish sauce, very famous in America. The guy started in his garage in San Francisco making fish sauce. And so it's a very close-knit community. Everybody knows everybody. And so at first, I was back in America, and then my American corporate side kind of popped up again. I was back in my surroundings. But when I went to deal with these Asian supermarkets or Asian distributors, it was almost like I was back in Asia again. I was like, oh man, I don't know what I'm getting myself into. And with Asian products, I believe it's one of the toughest segments to break into. The reason why is that Asians, I think, I can't speak for other races, but I feel like a lot of us are nature of habit. When we go into an Asian supermarket, we'll buy familiar products that our parents bought.
Right.
And so what happens is that, back after 75, after the Vietnam War, a lot of the Vietnamese products didn't make their way here because of the trade embargo. We didn't open up to 91 or 92.
Right.
So a lot of other countries, they created Vietnamese products for the Vietnamese people. And,
Uh,
I have to thank them for that because, I mean, back in that day, you'd be happy to find a fish sauce on a bottle to make some food. It's not like you're going to be picky or choosy.
yeah.
Um, so yeah, so it was very tough because nobody who knew who we were, and majority of the people that shop, how Asian parents shop, they might stop by for a sample, but then they just move on and buy the things they always buy,
Yeah.
right? Creature of habit. I'm sure in your family, you guys have a go-to, ramen noodle that you buy, a certain brand
Yep.
or certain kimchi, you just stick with that. It's very, very tough to break through.
Sure.
And so, one advice is that just try anything and everything because being a small company, your biggest advantage is that think of yourself as an anchovy swimming among sharks or whales, right? You can pivot, you can maneuver, you can swim through them real quick, and that's your only advantage that you have. You can make quick decisions and change up your whole strategy overnight. And so that's what we did. We tried a little bit of everything. We did radio, we did samples, we did newspaper, we did events, we did everything. And certain products, certain ways of doing it will hit. And I would say go with your crazy ideas, whatever products you have, because some of my craziest ideas has worked out. I'm very blessed and honored to say we service majority of the Las Vegas casinos with our fish sauce. And when I say that, a lot of people is like, wow, casinos buy fish sauce, because that's the last place you think,
Yeah.
right?
Well,
But actually, we're going through this whole like Asian wave right now. You can see it in everywhere, right? And so Westerners or non-Asians, they're interested in what we call Pan-Asian now. Pan-Asian's a little bit of everything. You get a
right.
little bit Korean food, a little bit Japanese, Chinese, Thai, Vietnamese, Singaporean, Malaysian food. And so this wave is happening right now where we're actually becoming mainstream in a lot of places. And so I guess like I would never be able to service them if I never thought, hey, why not give it a try? I see them serving pho, or some Vietnamese food. Who knows? Yeah. So yeah, that's how we kind of survive to this day. It's just hitting up everybody, doing anything we can. Because we don't have the kind of capital to build a brand institutionally.
Sure.
Institution business, when a brand comes out, you see it on TV, they spend millions of dollars. And then it also happens to be the best product and the cheapest on the shelf too.
Right.
And they ride it out for maybe 3-5 years before they start picking up. And as a small business owner, you just don't have the capital to survive that long. Yeah.
I think it's a common theme that we hear from our other guests on the show. I think of Wing Lam from Wahoo's, where you're a one-man band, right? Like your name, your face, your personality is the brand, is the product. You have to go out there. You have to let them know who you are, because you're right. You don't have the luxury of sending them a super expensive, some design firm created thing, and to say, come, we'll take you on this, marketing tour, or come visit us at our HQ. It's literally, like you said, you and a box of stuff out the back of your truck to say, hey, this is the good stuff, try us out. And so I would even say, even in 5 years, for you to go from I have an idea to being in the Las Vegas Strip, being at the slanted door at the Ferry Building, all these places that many listeners probably have tried their food, and realizing that your product and the kind of the story behind of how it all led to here, I think that is super cool, man. Let's talk. I don't want to focus on it too much, but let's talk about what's going on now, right? Because you are in communication with the casinos, the restaurants, and even the supermarkets. So let's say the supermarkets are doing much better in general because people are cooking at home.
Uh-huh.
What are you hearing from some of your restaurant clients or restaurant friends? Because I don't imagine that they're ordering their same normal quantities from you. And how have you had to pivot a little bit?
Yeah, it's crazy. I went to sleep one night, and the next day when I woke up, 50% of my business was essentially wiped out. All the casinos shut down, all the big restaurant groups shut down. Some are working really hard to, doing whatever it takes to keep, just breaking even each month so they can keep their staff alive. And some have really actually stepped up and, cook foods for medical workers with firemen and stuff like that. And so and so it's crazy right now. I think after this is over, life as we know it is going to change on every single level. you know um a lot of I talked to some people in the space that is doing, like, ghost kitchens and stuff, which is what the Uber guy
Right.
is doing. And then Vision Fund from Mr. Sun, from SoftBank, he's
Yeah.
also invested in some ghost kitchen setups and stuff. I think everybody's on that now, and all of them were telling me they were planting the seeds for the ghost kitchens to hit in 10 years, 5 to 10 years. But with this whole CV thing, it's literally, it fast forward them 5, 10 years, and it's happening now.
Right.
And I think it's a good thing that um this virus is not so deadly, because it really exposed us to how unprepared, not just the world or our country, but us as individuals, how unprepared we are. We see this in the movies all the time. And what's crazy, all the movies we're watching, it's happening, I would say 99%, script per script. And it really showed how unprepared we are. And I'm glad that this virus is not as deadly as maybe some down the line. I hope it never happens, but
Yeah.
I think with globalization it's so easy. But yeah, long story short, I think with any business model right now, it's a good time to reflect and kind of see and talk to each other, lean on each other, and then kind of realize, hey, how can we move forward? Because reality is everybody's got to eat, everybody's got to work, everybody got to buy clothing.
Yep.
I don't think most of the business will go out of business. They just have to readjust how the business model is going to be.
Yeah.
I'm a believer of, times like this is when it's actually, there's
Sure.
opportunities, positively too.
I agree.
Yeah.
Let's talk about the future of Danny and future of Son. So you and your wife are fourth generation. Is this something that you tell your future kids to make it number five? How do you view that? Because the world is changing so much faster.
You know, a lot of people might be surprised by this, but sunfish sauce is only one step of our three-step plan. Our plan was, so step one, we wanted to show the world that, hey, because Vietnam, I can't speak for other country, but Vietnam has kind of a brand image issue, right? I think a lot of communist countries have that, or third world, that they just don't produce high quality products. But we all know that not to be true. Samsung is made in Vietnam, Apple is made in China, and all the world uses it. And so I wanted to show first for the Vietnamese abroad, hey, there are high quality products in Vietnam. It's not all poison that they think that, like the manufacturers are all poisoning them. Because I think that's a crazy notion, because why would you want to kill your own your own customers?
Right.
Yes, there are lower quality products, and there are products with a lot of chemicals in it, but you know what reality is, nobody beats America with with chemical products. All the products we see at the shelf, it looks like a chemistry page. Not to knock on any of those brands, but that's just a reality that
Yeah.
people like to turn a blind eye to, but then
Sure.
gawk at certain countries. And so I wanted to change that image, because a lot of people don't realize this, but the number one country that Vietnam does food trading with is actually Japan. And we all know how tough Japan food laws and stuff are. And I would say the second or third toughest food country would be Korea and Singapore. And it just so happens Korea is the number two country we do food manufacturing with.
Mm.
And so I want to let people know, hey, we do have high quality products. You just have to support us, because if there's the plant demand, there will be supply.
Sure.
And the so that was the first phase of our project. Our second one is that we wanted to do a restaurant program. So we started about a year ago. We have to say big thank you to Splendid Door. They were kind of the first to uh, talk to us about it and was open to supporting us and our brand. And the idea with restaurant program is that we wanted to provide a premium product at commercial pricing for all our restaurants, because whether you're cooking Vietnamese food or Korean food or Japanese food, the younger generation, like the new wave of talented chefs, they can choose to cook they can choose to cook Western cuisine, Italian, American, French, and make so much more money, right? But they choose to cook their blood, which is Vietnamese food, Korean food, Japanese food. We're kind of see a surgeon, but like a new wave, right? Of like, I think you kind of like of younger chefs that is cooking their own food, and they're getting on the map, which is awesome. And so we were like, all these Asian brands they're using, no one is supporting them. So I wanted to do something about that. My bread and butter is supermarket, but our passion is we want to do a restaurant program and support them in that way. And so that's kind of been our second step, because we kind of feel like being in the food industry, it's a full circle, right? People go to supermarket to buy the product, or they go to the restaurants. And speaking on the restaurant, real quick, I would come out and just say it. The new wave of Asian restaurants, doesn't matter what cuisine, I would say they're more authentic than the old school restaurants. Here's why. The new wave, they're cooking it like our parents would. They buy the best ingredients. Whereas the old school Asian restaurants, they're looking to cut corners and price war each other, the race to the bottom where nobody wins.
Right.
And so I would say the new wave is actually cooking more authentic food. And then secondly, they're utilizing all the techniques that they learned from their parents or from French culinary, whatever. But all these techniques takes a day or two to make, which is exactly like how our parents would make food at home. Right. And so with those two things, best ingredients and, taking the time to cook it, I think, they're more authentic than the old school one. Nothing to knock against the old school, but I just hate when I hear, modern Asian, modern cuisine, modern Vietnamese, fusion. Well, you know what? If you look at it, the way our parents cook it, nobody will cook the same bowl of pho. Every mom have her own recipe. So does that make it not authentic? Of course not. But every mom for sure buys the best ingredient for their family, or the best they could afford. Yeah. And so, I want to change that narrative a little bit. And so we're kind of in our second stage now. And lastly, our third stage is that I really hope that artisanal or high quality food manufacturers from Vietnam and maybe other Asian countries that can see what we're doing and be like, hey, I don't need to water down my product to sell across overseas. I can sell a high quality product because I see other brands are able to do well with it. So I want, I hope to show that and do more than just myself.
I think that I hear your story, Danny. I think it's so amazing because you've lived in both countries. You've taken and learned the best of what you can from both cultures and both, business practices or business cultures. And now you've just taken everything, and yes, it's a business. Of course, it's supposed to make money, but your vision is far greater than that. And I think there are so many of us now, right? Whether it's you or Thai with Asians Never Die or me doing this or anybody else. Yes, we are grateful for our parents for putting survival at the top of the list and doing whatever they had to do for us to get here. But I think now it's this amazing wave, and we're just at the beginning of it, where so many of us are leaning into the rich history and culture that's made us and
Mm.
trying to make the best of it in this American context. But like you said, the world is getting smaller. So, whether you are doing business here and in Asia, it doesn't seem as wild as it used to be. The hurdles are not there as much. Um, and so, as we come out of this, COVID-19 pandemic, however long it lasts, I think we're also starting to see, at least in conversations with friends and other folks in the community, like we have to take care of ourselves, and not a very, my own family, but as a community, right? And that includes helping each other, shopping at each other's restaurants, ordering to go. If you had to choose, go buy McDonald's or go to a locally owned store. Like I think more of us are starting to lean towards locally owned stuff because we all have friends in that line of work. So
Yeah.
this has been super cool. So I want to get your final thoughts in the form of a letter that we finish most of our shows with, and it goes back to the theme of Dear Asian Americans. And you mentioned Damon John's FUBU earlier, and so the letter concept is also very much of a for us bias, right? This show, this podcast, is a for us or to us, from us, but also bias. Um, so I'll start the letter, Dear Asian Americans, and whether it is a younger version of Danny back in Costa Mesa in '92, or future Danny Jr. at some point, share with us what you would like to say to the Asian American community. So I will start the letter. Uh, Dear Asian Americans.
Yeah, I would say, dear Asian Americans, go for it. What do you have to lose? I think that your crazy ideas are always going to be your best ideas. It's kind of cliche to say, but when you take the test, it always end up the first guess that you take, and you don't go with it. It always ends up being the right answer. And so I would tell others to go with your gut instincts. And I hope from this, sharing my story from this podcast and hearing other stories that Jerry is doing, it will show you that as Asian Americans, the world is our oyster. We have an advantage for being dual culture, and that we should use that as a tool. And also Jerry's podcast will also show that there's Asian Americans in all aspects of industry, whether you're a business owner or you're in corporate life. You can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can be an engineer, you want to, but there's also so much more. And your podcast, Jerry, definitely show that you can be successful doing other things, not just monetarily, but just being successful in your community. Or because at the end of the day, health is wealth, and as long as you're happy, that's something money can't buy.
Thank you, Danny. This is all that's going on, and getting to know you and so many people through this process is, you're absolutely right. There's no one way to be a good Asian American. You can be a doctor, you can be a lawyer, you can be anything you want, but ultimately it's, are you making your parents proud and doing the most that you can? And then I think, doing interviews like this and storytelling projects like this is, like, what are you leaving to the kids, right? Like your wife's great grandfather started this thing that now is your income and your livelihood and your passion in life. So as we think about, what things of, sure, survival and money and legacy is great, but what can they be proud of Grandpa Danny and Grandpa Jerry years from now, and saying they built something that, also because as so many of our guests have said, like, we can't change the color of our skin, we can't change our history, so let's lean into it, let's be proud of it, not in the most healthy and most productive of ways, and really look around the room and see who we can help, because right now, particularly with all that's going on, we are going to be our best support system. And so if you are going to an Asian supermarket, you're listening to this on the way to the supermarket and you see Sun on the shelf, buy that, try it, buy one for your mom, tell her to change her habits. If you go to a restaurant that has, that use fish sauce, ask him to check it out. I think, this is the time to really start a global movement of us supporting each other's businesses. Um, because you're right, even you might be a doctor, but you know what? You cook food at home. You might be a lawyer, but you got a friend who owns a restaurant. So there are ways to help everybody. And so, um, Danny, thank you so much. This is, and then to give you context, we went from introduction to recording this within 24 hours. So I really appreciate your energy and your desire to come on and share your story. Um, Best of luck. I look forward to better days when we can do one of these in person, or to
Yeah,
go to a
definitely.
restaurant that uses your sauce and have a drink and celebrate, man.
Yeah, definitely. Real quick, if you don't mind, during this crisis, what we are also doing is that we're supplementing fish sauce to all our restaurants around the world. Even if you're not my customer, if I have distribution channels to get it to you, just go ahead and reach out to me. And my Instagram is sunfish sauce, SONFISH sauce, or info@sunfishsauce.com. And then, that's something we want to do to give back to the community. If you're giving out free fish sauce, rice, basic Asian necessity, I can also help supplement with that. Or if you're just, cooking for frontliners, it's not a lot, but we hope that we can contribute something to the cause. And I think keeping ourselves busy with positive things will get the days go by faster, because at the very least we still got to the end of the month, guys.
At least to the end of the month. We're recording this on the 8th, so we got another 3 weeks to go. Hey, that's something awesome that you guys are doing. And so, on behalf of everybody who's benefited from that, and all the way down to our ridiculously brave and amazing frontline health workers who are putting their lives out there, so we can have even the privilege of having this conversation. Thank you for doing that. Again, reach out to Danny at Sunfish Sauce, or check him out on the website, sunfishsauce.com, and get in touch with him that way. Or if you have a restaurant friend in your life or somebody else who can benefit from his generosity in his program, share this episode with them, share his contact info with them. Um, all I know is at the end of all this, Danny, we are going to throw probably one of the biggest parties Asian America has ever seen. And it's going to
Yeah,
be so
definitely.
good. Yeah, it's going to be so good to see everybody, and to put real faces to all the interactions and all the help that we've given each other during this challenging time. So, to you and your family and your company and your team, thank you so much, and best of luck. And I will see you in brighter days, my friend.
You got it. We'll have drinks soon, everybody.
Alrighty, thank you, Danny.
Thanks.